Let me introduce myself. My name is Emily, and I want to tell you about how I met the love of my life and how our journey unfolded. It was a warm summer evening when fate intervened and brought James into my life. A close friend of mine, Sarah, was hosting a small gathering at her place, and I was excited to catch up with old friends and meet new ones. Little did I know that this particular evening would change my life forever. As I walked into Sarah's living room, my eyes immediately locked with those of a handsome stranger. He had a charming smile that could light up the darkest room, and his warm brown eyes seemed to hold a world of stories. I couldn't help but be drawn to him. Our initial conversation was filled with laughter and a sense of ease. It was as if we had known each other for years. His name was James, and he had an infectious enthusiasm for life. We talked about our interests, shared our dreams, and discovered a remarkable connection. As the evening progressed, we found ourselves engrossed in deep conversation, oblivious to the world around us. The sparks between us were undeniable, and before we knew it, the party had ended, and it was just the two of us, lost in our own little bubble of happiness. James looked at me with a mischievous twinkle in his eye and said, "Emily, I can't remember the last time I felt this connected to someone. There's something truly special about you, and I can't let this moment slip away without asking for your number." I blushed, feeling a rush of excitement and uncertainty all at once. I replied, "James, I feel the same way. This evening has been magical, and I would love to stay in touch. Here's my number." From that moment on, our love story began to unfold. We spent countless hours talking on the phone, discovering more about each other with every conversation. Our connection grew stronger, and it wasn't long before we started going on dates, exploring the city together, and creating memories that would last a lifetime. One night, as we sat under a starlit sky, James held my hand and looked into my eyes. With sincerity in his voice, he said, "Emily, I want you to know that you mean the world to me. You've brought so much happiness into my life, and I can't imagine a future without you. Will you be mine?" Tears welled up in my eyes as I replied, "James, you have captured my heart completely. I love you with all that I am, and I would be honored to be yours forever." In that moment, as we sealed our love with a tender kiss, I knew deep in my heart that James was the one I had been waiting for. Little did I know the challenges that lay ahead, but for now, I bathed in the warmth of our love, knowing that together, we could conquer anything that came our way. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, as James and I embarked on a beautiful journey of love and discovery. Each moment spent with him deepened my affection, and it became clear that we were meant to be together. We delved into each other's worlds, sharing our hopes, dreams, and deepest fears. James was an incredibly compassionate listener, always offering his unwavering support and encouragement. We laughed together, cried together, and celebrated life's joys as a united force. One sunny afternoon, we decided to take a stroll in the park, hand in hand. The gentle breeze played with our hair, and the sweet fragrance of blooming flowers filled the air. We found a cozy spot beneath a towering oak tree, where we sat down on a blanket, gazing into each other's eyes. James broke the silence, his voice filled with tenderness. "Emily, I never thought it was possible to feel so complete until I met you. You bring a sense of peace and happiness into my life that I've never experienced before. I wanted to build a future with you, filled with love and adventures. Will you be my partner in this journey?" My heart swelled with love and happiness as I replied, "James, from the moment I met you, I knew that you were someone truly special. You've shown me what it means to be loved unconditionally, and I can't imagine my life without you. Yes, 1,000 times yes." We sealed our commitment with a passionate kiss, the world around us fading into the background. In that moment, I realized that love had the power to transcend boundaries and create a bond that nothing could break. As our relationship blossomed, James introduced me to his close-knit group of friends. They were warm and welcoming, accepting me into their fold with open arms. We spent many memorable evenings together, sharing laughter, stories, and the occasional friendly banter. One night, during a dinner gathering at our friend Mark's house, the topic of marriage came up. Mark, always the joker, turned to James and me with a mischievous grin. "So when are you two lovebirds going to tie the knot? We're all waiting for a grand wedding." James chuckled, his eyes sparkling with love as he looked at me. "Well, Mark, I can't speak for Emily, but I can fake for Emily, but I can tell you that she's the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. When the time is right, we'll make it official." I blushed, feeling a mix of excitement and anticipation. "You're absolutely right, James. When the time is right, we'll embark on that beautiful journey together." From that day forward, the idea of marriage lingered in the back of our minds, a symbol of the deep commitment and love we shared. We continued to nurture our relationship, cherishing every moment and building a foundation of trust and understanding. Little did we know the challenges that awaited us, particularly the disapproval of James' mother. But for now, in the midst of our love's bloom, we held on to the belief that love would conquer all and that our bond would withstand any storm that came our way. As James and I delved deeper into our relationship, we faced an unexpected hurdle: the disapproval of James' mother, Mrs. Thompson. From the beginning, it was evident that she held a disdain for me, and her actions and words became increasingly hurtful over time. One evening, James and I paid a visit to his parents' house, hoping to spend quality time with his family. However, as soon as we entered, Mrs. Thompson's icy glare fell upon me. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and tension hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Mrs. Thompson's voice dripped with disdain as she addressed me. "Emily, it's been a while since you last graced us with your presence. I suppose you've been too busy with your own life to care about family." I swallowed my pride and mustered a smile, determined to remain respectful. "Mrs. Thompson, I apologize if it seemed that way. I've been working and spending time with James, but I'm here now to spend time with James, but I'm here now to spend time with all of you." Her eyes narrowed, and she retorted, "You know, James deserves someone who can truly understand him, someone from our background. I just don't see how you fit into that picture." James, torn between his love for me and his loyalty to his mother, attempted to defuse the situation. "Mom, Emily, and I love each other. We understand and support each other in ways you may not see. I hope you can find it in your heart to accept her." Mrs. Thompson's lips curled into a smile. "Oh, James, don't be naive. You're blinded by infatuation. You'll see that she's not the right match for you. Just wait and see." Her words stung, and I struggled to hold back tears. It was clear that Mrs. Thompson was determined to drive a wedge between James and me, and her disapproval weighed heavily on our relationship. In the following months, Mrs. Thompson's hostility only grew more apparent. She would make passive, aggressive remarks, belittle me in front of others, and find ways to undermine our bond. Despite her constant mistreatment, I remained steadfast in my love for James, determined not to let her poison our happiness. One evening, as James and I sat in our favorite coffee shop, I opened up about my concerns. Tears welled up in my eyes as I confessed, "James, I love you more than words can express, but your mother's treatment of me is becoming unbearable. I don't understand why she can't accept our love and be happy for us." James took my hands in his eyes filled with empathy. "Emily, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. I never imagined it would come to this. Please know that my love for you is unwavering. We'll find a way to overcome this together." His words offered solace, and we held on to the hope that love would eventually prevail. Little did we know that the situation would escalate further, testing the strength of our bond and our determination to fight for our happiness. As we braced ourselves for the challenges ahead, we knew that our love was worth fighting for, even in the face of Mrs. Thompson's disapproval. Our journey was far from over, and we were determined to prove that true love could withstand any obstacle that came our way. As our love grew stronger, so did the interference of James' mother, Mrs. Thompson. Her disapproval of our relationship manifested in constant meddling and attempts to keep us apart. It became increasingly clear that she would go to great lengths to undermine our happiness. One evening, as James and I made plans for a weekend getaway, Mrs. Thompson called him urgently. She insisted that he cancel our plans, claiming that a family emergency required his immediate attention. Although skeptical, James felt torn between his loyalty to his mother and his desire to be with me. James hesitated, his voice filled with frustration as he spoke to his mother on the phone. "Mom, I understand your concern, but Emily and I have been looking forward to this trip for weeks. Can it wait? I want to be there for you, but I also want to prioritize our relationship." Mrs. Thompson's voice grew stern. "James, I am your mother, and family should always come first. This trip can wait. You need to be here with us. Your priorities should align with ours." James sighed, torn between his love for me and his sense of duty. He turned to me, his eyes filled with regret. "Emily, I'm so sorry, but I have to cancel our trip. My mother insists that it's urgent, and I can't ignore her pleas." As disappointed as I was, I understood James' predicament. I reassured him, "James, I understand. Family is important, and if your mother needs you, I won't stand in the way. Just know that I'm here for you, and we'll make up for this another time." It became a pattern. Mrs. Thompson would find excuses for James to spend less time with me, manipulating him into prioritizing her desires over our relationship. We both felt the strain of her interference, and it tested the strength of our love. One evening, as we sat together, James opened up about his inner turmoil. His voice trembled with frustration. "Emily, I hate how my mother constantly tries to control our lives. It's tearing me apart. I love you, and I want to be with you, but her manipulations make it so hard." I took his hand in mine, offering support. "James, I understand how difficult this is for you. It hurts me too, but we have to stay strong and united. We can't let her come between us. Together we can overcome any obstacle." We vowed to communicate openly and stand united against Mrs. Thompson's interference. However, her actions only intensified. She would make subtle remarks questioning our compatibility, plant seeds of doubt in James' mind, and create rifts within our relationship. It felt like a constant battle with Mrs. Thompson using every opportunity to drive us apart. But we refused to let her succeed. We sought solace in our love, leaning on each other for support, and reminding ourselves of the bond we shared. As we faced Mrs. Thompson's meddling, we grew stronger, learning to navigate the challenges as a team. We knew that our love was worth fighting for, and we were determined to overcome the obstacles that threatened to derail our happiness. Little did we know that the situation would soon reach a breaking point, testing the limits of our endurance and pushing us to make difficult decisions that would shape the course of our future. Mrs. Thompson's interference in our relationship escalated to new heights when she attempted to set me up, hoping to create a James in me. Her devious plan unfolded on a seemingly ordinary afternoon, leaving us reeling from the unexpected turn of events. One day, Mrs. Thompson invited me to lunch under the pretense of wanting to mend our strained relationship. Though skeptical, I agreed, hoping that maybe this would be a chance for us to find common ground. As we sat at a quaint cafe, Mrs. Thompson wore a disingenuous smile, her eyes calculating. She leaned in closer, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Emily, I want you to know that I've been reflecting on our relationship. I realized that I may have been too harsh on you. Let's start anew, shall we?" I cautiously reciprocated her gesture, hoping that her words carried genuine intentions. "Mrs. Thompson, I appreciate your willingness to reconcile. I believe that we can find a way to coexist peacefully for the sake of James and our relationship." Little did I know that Mrs. Thompson had ulterior motives lurking behind her seemingly friendly facade. As our conversation progressed, she subtly dropped hints about a well-to-do acquaintance of hers, insinuating that I should explore other romantic possibilities. With feigned concern, Mrs. Thompson leaned forward, her eyes filled with false empathy. "Emily, have you ever considered that maybe James isn't the best match for you? I have a friend, Charles, who is quite successful. He could offer you a life of luxury and stability." Maybe it's time to reconsider your choices. Shock and disbelief washed over me as I realized the depths to which Mrs. Thompson would stoop to sabotage our relationship. Anger began to boil within me, but I maintained my composure, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I responded, my voice steady but laced with indignation. Mrs. Thompson, I am committed to James and no amount of manipulation will change that. I love him, not for his wealth or success, but for the person he is. I won't entertain these suggestions any further. Mrs. Thompson's mask slipped, her eyes filled with fury. You're making a grave mistake, Emily. Mark my words, you'll regret it. With a heavy heart, I left the cafe realizing that Mrs. Thompson's attempt to set me up was just another desperate ploy to tear us apart. It was a painful reminder of the toxic influence she held over our lives. That evening, I confided in James, recounting the encounter in detail. His face twisted in a mix of anger and sadness as he listened to my words. Emily, I am so sorry you had to go through that. My mother's actions are unacceptable and I can't stand by and let her continue to manipulate us. We need to take a stand, determined not to let Mrs. Thompson's schemes dictate our happiness any longer. We decided it was time to confront her and assert our boundaries. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we couldn't allow her toxic presence to poison our love any further. As we prepared to face the storm that lay ahead, we held on to each other tightly, ready to navigate the turbulent waters together. We were determined to protect our relationship and reclaim the happiness that Mrs. Thompson had tried so hard to steal from us. The tension between us and Mrs. Thompson reached its breaking point on a fateful night that would forever be etched in our memories. It was a night filled with despair and heartache as the depths of Mrs. Thompson's cruelty were unveiled. James had planned a surprise dinner for us at a cozy restaurant, hoping to create a moment of respite from the turmoil we had been facing. However, as we arrived at the restaurant hand in hand, a sinking feeling washed over me. Mrs. Thompson was already there, waiting with a smug smile on her face. She greeted us with false warmth, her eyes gleaming with malice. James, Emily, how lovely of you to join me. I thought it would be nice for us to have a family dinner and clear the air. My heart sank as I realized that Mrs. Thompson had orchestrated this meeting with the intention of causing more pain. I glanced at James, searching for reassurance and strength. James, aware of his mother's manipulative ways, responded with caution. Mother, we've had enough of your interference. This is supposed to be a special evening for us, and we won't allow you to ruin it. Mrs. Thompson's smile twisted into a cold sneer. Oh, my dear James, you underestimate the power I hold over your life. I will do whatever it takes to protect you from this mistake. Her words struck a nerve, and a mix of anger and sadness coursed through me. I mustered the courage to confront her, my voice trembling with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. Mrs. Thompson, I love your son with all my heart, and I have endured enough of your cruelty. You can't control our lives forever. We deserve to be happy, and we won't let you tear us apart. As the tension in the room escalated, I felt a sudden, sharp pain on my cheek. Mrs. Thompson had slapped me, her actions fueled by rage and contempt. Stunned, I stood there, tears welling up in my eyes as she launched into a tirade of insults and accusations. You are not worthy of being my son's wife. I will never accept you into our family. You've poisoned his mind, and I won't allow you to ruin his life any further. The weight of Mrs. Thompson's words and the sting of her physical assault were unbearable. I turned to James, my voice choked with anguish. James, how can you allow her to treat me this way? I can't endure her abuse any longer. I need to leave. James, torn between his love for me and the ingrained sense of duty towards his mother, hesitated. Emily, I can't go against my mother. She's my family. Devastated by his response, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. It was a breaking point, a realization that I couldn't continue to fight a battle that James wasn't ready to fully join. With tears streaming down my face, I made a decision fueled by self-preservation. James, if you can't stand up for me, then I can't be a part of this anymore. I deserve respect and love, and I won't settle for anything less. I want a divorce. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. James looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of shock and regret. Emily, please, don't leave. Let's find a way to work through this. But the pain was too deep, and I knew that I couldn't endure any more suffering. With a heavy heart, I turned away from James and walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind the shattered fragments of a love that had once flourished. That night, I sought solace at a friend's house, finding a temporary refuge from the chaos that had consumed my life. In the depths of my despair, I questioned whether I would ever find happiness again, or if my dreams of a loving marriage were forever shattered. Little did I know that this night of despair would mark the turning point in my journey, leading me toward a path of healing, self-discovery, and ultimately, justice. After the painful night of despair, I woke up at my friend's house with a heaviness in my heart, but a newfound determination to rebuild my life. The events with Mrs. Thompson had shattered my belief in a happily ever after, but I refused to let her actions define my future. I sought legal advice and decided to file for divorce, citing the domestic violence and emotional abuse I had endured at the hands of Mrs. Thompson. With the support of my lawyer and loved ones, I prepared myself for the battle ahead, knowing that justice and my own well-being were at stake. At the courthouse, I stood before the judge, my voice steady but filled with the weight of my experiences. Your Honor, I stand before you seeking a divorce from my husband, James Thompson. Our marriage has been marred by domestic violence and the persistent emotional abuse perpetrated by his mother. I cannot continue to subject myself to such torment. The courtroom was filled with tension as Mrs. Thompson and James listened to my words. Their faces a mix of surprise and disbelief. I held my head high, determined to reclaim my voice and my life. The judge listened attentively, then turned to James and Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, do you have any response to these allegations? Mrs. Thompson's voice was filled with venom as she spoke. Your Honor, these accusations are baseless. We have always cared for Emily and her well-being. It is she who has manipulated and deceived our son. James, torn between his loyalty to his mother and the truth that had unfolded, hesitated for a moment before speaking. Your Honor, I can't deny the troubled relationship between Emily and my mother, but I never condoned or participated in any acts of violence. I deeply regret the pain that has been caused and I am willing to accept the consequences of my inaction. The judge's gaze softened as he addressed me. Mrs. Thompson, it is evident that you have endured a difficult situation. Based on the evidence and testimonies presented, I find it appropriate to grant you a divorce and issue a restraining order against both Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Thompson. Additionally, they will be held responsible for compensating you for the damages caused. A mix of relief and sadness washed over me as the judge's decision echoed in the courtroom. It was a bittersweet victory knowing that justice was served but also acknowledging the pain that had brought us to this point. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The road to healing would be long, but I had gained the strength to move forward and rebuild my life, no longer shackled by Mrs. Thompson's manipulation. I could now chart my own path and find happiness on my own terms. In the days and months that followed, I focused on self-care, therapy, and the support of my loved ones. I discovered a resilience within myself that I never knew existed. Slowly but surely, I began to heal the wounds inflicted by Mrs. Thompson's cruelty. Through the divorce settlement, I was awarded compensation for the damages endured, which included a sum of $40,000. It served as a reminder that my pain and suffering were not in vain and that I had prevailed against the injustice I had faced. With each passing day, I grew stronger and more determined to create a life filled with love, happiness, and independence. I found solace in my own company, surrounded myself with supportive friends, and pursued my passions with renewed vigor. While the scars from that tumultuous chapter would always be a part of my story, I refused to let them define me. I emerged from the darkness with a newfound appreciation for my own worth and the knowledge that I had the strength to overcome any obstacle. As I closed the chapter on my marriage and the toxic influence of Mrs. Thompson, I embraced a future filled with hope and the promise of a love that would honor and cherish me. I had found the strength to move on, to rewrite my own narrative, and to create a life that was truly my own. We don't need a daughter who's a failure. I was abandoned by my family the day I graduated from middle school. When I got home, the house was empty. Eventually, I managed to get through to my mother on the phone, but she, along with my father and Stacy, laughed at my reaction. It seems the family decided to move to New York without me. Because Stacy passed an audition at a modeling agency. Stacy is going to become the top model in the US. So, what will Jessica become in the future? I am missing my left leg. Does that mean I have no value in living? I was in despair for a while, but being abandoned by my family gave me freedom. Someday, I will make the family that abandoned me regret their decision. My name is Jessica Foster. I am 25 years old, living with my paternal grandparents. Here, Grandpa. I've fixed the button on your shirt. Oh, thanks. Jessica, you're really good at sewing. I can't even thread a needle anymore. It's okay. Leave everything to me. When I boast about it, my grandparents would say, "You're so reliable." Fixing a shirt button is an easy task for me. I want them to rely on me for everything. My grandparents are my benefactors. The oldest memory I vaguely remember is from a long time ago. Feeling it strange not to have a leg. At the age of 3, I lost my left leg below the knee. I barely remember it, but the pain and the injections still give me goosebumps. But more than the pain, being alone in the hospital was unbearable. Mom didn't come today either. Will she come tomorrow? When I asked, the nurse smiled vaguely. She'll surely come on Sunday. I was consoled, but it never happened. The kind nurse's lies made young me even more depressed. Normally, a child at that age wouldn't stop moving, but I had to live a restricted life for a while. However, I think I was walking normally by the time I was in elementary school. I got a prosthetic leg, though I sometimes had to sit out during physical education classes. I could climb stairs and run lightly. There was almost no hindrance to my daily life. I wasn't treated differently at school and I had friends. I loved school. I wish I could stay at school forever because I had no place at home. Ta-da! I tried on my new dress. How do I look? Cute? My sister Stacy, who is 2 years older than me, twirled around. The soft skirt with frills spread out like a flower. Stacy, you're so cute. Just like a model. My mother praised Stacy to the skies. My father took photos of Stacy from various angles. Stacy naturally lifted her chin as if it was expected. Really, Stacy looks good in anything. I want to buy her lots of clothes. Maybe she'll be a model in the future? Her legs are so long. My mother put her hands on her cheeks and wiggled her buttocks. My father nodded vigorously. My parents were seriously smitten with Stacy. At about 10 years old, I was the only one feeling out of place at home. Right? I do have long legs, don't I? I think they're longer than my friends. Yes, yes. I think Stacy has the longest legs. Oh, it's troubling how quickly you outgrow your cute clothes. Stacy put her index finger to her lips. Normally, the clothes I can't wear anymore would go to my younger sister as hand-me-downs. But Jessica isn't normal. Ah, well, she's not normal. They got excited on their own, but for some reason, they looked at me with pity. Is there a rule in my family to demean me once a day? By the age of 10, I could accept reality, but when I was younger, I was dominated by sadness and anger. Stacy has always been wearing fluttery skirts like a doll while I was always in baggy pants. The soft materials of gray or black sweatpants look like pajamas no matter how you looked at them. Given that the pants match, the top is also a t-shirt with a hoodie. I want to wear a cute skirt too. I appealed to my mother. Then she looked at me with wide eyes in surprise. What? That's not gonna happen. Your leg isn't normal, you can't expose it to others. Wouldn't you be embarrassed if people saw your leg? I'm not embarrassed. All my friends know about my leg. No way. Even if you're not embarrassed, it embarrasses me, so stop. If I can't wear skirts that show my legs, at least I want to wear cool jeans. Huh? Jeans? The fabric is hard, so it would be difficult to wear, right? I've been buying you pants that are easy to wear for your sake. Do you understand my kindness? Besides, jeans are expensive, so no. But you buy a lot of clothes for Stacy, right? I bought you a leg, didn't I? I'm spending money on something that's not even necessary for others. And yet you still want more? Clothes for Stacy, a leg for you. Is that strange? Hey, is that strange? Caving under my mother's pressure, I shook my head. My mother muttered complaints. Your leg was expensive, you know. I'm paying for something that wouldn't normally be necessary. Giving you a luxury and yet you still want more? You're such a greedy child. Don't trouble your mother. The next day, Stacy came back from shopping at the mall with our father, holding new clothes and performing a fashion show in front of the mirror. Meanwhile, I was stuck wearing the same plain sweatpants for both sleeping and going out. I always thought about wanting to dress up. That didn't change even when I became a middle schooler. Actually, I was looking forward to wearing my middle school uniform. But I ended up going to school in my regular sweatpants. It seems my mother had talked to the school out of concern for me. My kind mother successfully made me out to be a pitiful child. On occasions when a uniform was necessary, I had to wear boys' pants. It was so convenient that the boy next door, Ryan, had just graduated. So, it was hand-me-downs. Whether it was just because a boy's uniform was available or she wanted to hide my leg that much, I couldn't understand my mother's thoughts. Losing such a sweet emotion as sadness, I thought, so that's how it is? As if it was someone else's problem. Stacy's aspiration to become a model grew stronger. She would upload pictures like Sweets and Me, or Blue Sky and Me on social media and smirk at the number of likes. Often, Stacy would command me to take her photos and hand me her smartphone. I wouldn't hear the end of it if I refused, so at one point I stopped refusing. But Stacy's review was strict, making me retake photos multiple times. Which was troublesome. Well, this looks good. The angle from below makes my legs look super long. This is okay. Wait, what? Hold on a sec. No way, Jessica is reflected in the window behind. Immediately, Stacy deleted all the photos she just took. That was close. It would be the worst if people found out I have such a sister. You appearing in my photo is so inconsiderate. You're not supposed to be seen by people. Think about your place. After helping with the photo shoot, this was the treatment I received. I didn't even have the energy to fight back, just taking in all of Stacy's insults. I was not needed in this house. I was just in the way. I understood that painfully well, so I tried not to provoke my parents or Stacy and just existed like air. But, never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be abandoned the moment I graduated middle school. What's this? When I returned home after the graduation ceremony, the house was in disarray. Clothes and a spatula were inexplicably scattered on the floor. But the TV, refrigerator, and Stacy's mirror were nowhere to be found. It looked like no one ever lived there. Mom, are you here? My mother didn't show up to the graduation ceremony. Looking around, it seemed I was the only one whose parents hadn't come. If she had other things to do, it couldn't be helped. But she had been in bed when I left the house. So she probably just wasn't interested in my graduation. The strange state of the house made me shiver. I didn't care about the empty house. What mattered was whether my mother was safe. Could she have encountered the burglars? The worst scenarios flashed through my mind. Despite my mother's indifference towards me, I was worried. I checked the bedroom, bathroom, and balcony, but my mother was nowhere to be found. I tried calling my mother's cell phone, but it didn't connect. So, I called my father, only to get his voicemail. Restless, I kept calling my mother over and over again. The ringing went on endlessly. Suddenly, the sound stopped. What? It was my mother's voice. Though she sounded annoyed, I was relieved and nearly cried. Mom? You finally answered. I'm so glad you're safe. Are you okay? Huh? I quickly explained the situation at home. Then, my mother burst into laughter midway through the conversation. What are you misunderstanding? There was no burglar. How do you know? Of course we know. We just moved out. What? I hadn't realized it until now because I was so desperate. But the background on the other end of the phone was a bit noisy. I could hear Stacy and my father laughing. Hey, Mom, what's Jessica saying? She's panicking, thinking a burglar got into the house. See, I told you we should have left a note. Poor Jessica. I couldn't keep up with the cheerful trio. Hey, Jessica. We're moving to New York. Do you know why? I couldn't answer because I didn't know. Guess what? I'm going to become a model. It seems that Stacy passed the audition for a modeling agency. And my family, excluding me, decided to move to New York. Jessica just graduated from middle school. So she'll be fine on her own, right? We could have moved earlier but waited until today for your sake. You understand our kindness, don't you? So they had taken care of me until my compulsory education ended. Although I had decided to go to high school, if I wanted to attend, I had to figure out the finances on my own. Finding a job now would be impossible. My mother taunted me cheerfully. Well, try to figure it out on your own. While I was frozen with my phone to my ear, my mother delivered the final blow. Stacy is going to become the #1 model in the US. And Jessica, what will you become in the future? We don't need a failed daughter. Then the call was disconnected. Horrible, impossible, help me, don't abandon me. I wanted to call back and plead, but I stopped myself. My voice wouldn't reach my mother anyway. It was impossible for me, just 15 years old and freshly graduated from middle school, to suddenly live on my own. Would my middle school teachers help me if I pleaded with them? No, that would just be a bother. Then my grandparents came to mind. My paternal grandparents lived in the same city, but I hadn't seen them in about 10 years. My mother often badmouthed them to me. According to her, they were devils who tormented my strong-willed mother. I might be turned away at their doorstep, but they were the only relatives I could turn to. Still in my uniform with a congratulatory flower pinned to my chest, I boarded a bus and headed to my grandparents' house, whom I barely remembered. Could it be Jessica? Jessica, is that you? You've grown so much. I've missed you. As soon as we met, my grandma, with tears in her eyes, hugged me. I had braced myself for some evil people. But all the tension drained from my body and tears streamed down my face. Emotions I hadn't realized I was suppressing overwhelmed me. I collapsed at the entrance and told my grandparents everything while sobbing. My grandma's face, twisted in distress, lost for words. My grandpa gently patted my shoulder as I sobbed. It's okay, you don't need to worry. My grandparents were not the villains I had imagined. And I, alone in the world, was saved by them. Jessica isn't a failure. You're a normal girl. Don't hesitate, child, live as you wish. Since then, I've been living with my grandparents. Since coming to this house, I've never been told a no. Whenever I consult my grandparents, they always say, give it a try. And so, for the first time in my memory, I wore a fluttering knee-length skirt. Jessica, you look lovely. It suits you. A mix of shyness and joy filled my heart. This was the first time I realized how much joy wearing clothes I liked could bring. My grandparents accepted me no matter what. When I dyed my hair blonde, my grandpa said, it looks good on you. When I bought pants with torn knees, my grandma, worried, added appliques to them, and I secretly cried. I had been saving up from my part-time job to buy a sewing machine. But on Christmas morning, I found a high-end sewing machine placed beside my pillow. I was surprised that Santa Claus came for me at this age. All these are my precious memories. Living without restrictions. I went on to attend a fashion school after graduating from high school. And while attending the school, I launched my own brand. I create the cute skirts and cool denim pants I've always admired. My designs focus not only on style, but also on inclusivity. They are clothes that anyone, regardless of age, health, or physical limitations, can wear comfortably. Now, I am 25 years old. My work is going well, and I am living fulfilling days. However, the situation suddenly turned sour. Jessica, long time no see. My mother greeted me with open arms. It seemed she had been waiting for me in front of my company. As I took a step back, she took 2 steps closer with big strides. Looking around for help, I noticed my father was also there, scratching his head with a silly smile. Wow, Jessica, I didn't think you could make it. This is your company, isn't it? That's amazing. I've always believed you would become someone great. It's been 10 years since I was abandoned by my family. I wasn't looking for a touching reunion. The reason my parents appeared before me now was obvious. Recently, I had a TV interview. It was mainly about the products my company offers. But my parents only focused on me being the CEO. Really amazing. I saw you on TV and immediately looked up everything about you. Your company's annual sales are $500 million? Does that make you a billionaire? Wow, my daughter is so incredible. It makes me so proud. My mother was excited as she grabbed my hand. Let's live together again. We've moved back from New York. She narrowed her eyes kindly. Despite the warm atmosphere she tried to create, my heart didn't flutter. Instead, my back got chills. Mother? I tilted my head slightly. Excuse me, but I don't have a mother. What, Jessica? Trying not to sound too serious, I smiled lightly and informed her. 10 years ago, I was abandoned by my family. Mother, father, and sister, you all abandoned me. So, I don't have a mother. I've been asked about my family by school friends and others before. If I honestly said I was abandoned on the day of my middle school graduation, I would undoubtedly be pitted. So, I always smile a little and act as if I don't care about the past. Are you angry, Jessica? Still holding a grudge over something that happened 10 years ago? You're unexpectedly vindictive. My mother tried to laugh it off, but I didn't drop my polite smile. It's been 10 years, so I'm not angry anymore. I'm just indifferent to people who are irrelevant to me. My mother's jaw trembled as she opened her eyes wide. It seems when you succeed at work or win the lottery, suddenly you have more relatives. Flies that swarm around money are to be exterminated. After all, I can't affirm that this aged woman before me is truly my biological mother. Even though it's been 10 years, she looked quite different from the mother in my memories. Come on, Jessica. We're family. We're tied by bonds that can't be cut even if we wanted to. My mother, who had been rolling her eyes for a moment, regained her composure and grabbed my hand firmly again. I can't say much since my memory of family has faded. But you are not my mother. My mother squeezed my hand harder, but I continued calmly, without changing my expression. Because my mother isn't an old lady with wrinkles like you. My mother's hand, which had been gripping mine, jerked away. She covered her face with that hand. My sister went to New York to pursue modeling. I remember that my mother also had a high sense of beauty and was diligent about skincare. No matter how many years have passed, my mother in her 50s couldn't possibly look like an old woman now. No offense, but you are in your 70s, aren't you? My mother let out a small shriek, her face contorting as more wrinkles etched themselves deeper. The ugly sight was like that of a wicked old woman straight out of a fairy tale. Though I'm treating her as a stranger, I know deep down she has traces of my mother. But it's true she looks to be in her 70s. Her face is covered in wrinkles, and the skin on her cheeks sags like a bulldog's. Her hair is streaked with gray, dry, and frizzy. More than being thin, she looks emaciated. The fingers that gripped my hand earlier were like dried twigs. She looks too different from the somewhat beautiful mother I had 10 years ago. You ungrateful. After all I did for you, giving birth and raising you, you repay me like this? I am truly your mother. Shouldn't a daughter do at least a bit of filial piety? My mother lunged at me. Seeing her drastic change and desperate manner, she must be really struggling in life. Filial piety, you say? I asked quietly, and my mother's mouth twisted into a smile. You're a CEO, right? Then it's natural for you to support your family. Yes, I will support my important family. Then, I easily brushed off my mother's frail hand. My family consists only of my grandparents. What? Since the rest of my family abandoned me, I have no obligation to support them, right? But. You have money, don't be mean. I'm not asking for all your fortune. Just about $10,000 or so would do. I just looked down at her as she desperately clung to me. She changed her tone, trying to appeal to me with tears. Look, Jessica. I'm in trouble. Life in New York is hard because of the high cost of living. I've had to borrow a little money. Can't you help me? We're family, aren't we? My mother looked at me with teary eyes. Unfortunately, the pleading look of an old woman doesn't move my heart. Just when I was getting fed up with dealing with her, two figures approached from behind my mother. What do you want after all this time? When my mother turned around, my grandparents were there. Her face visibly contorted. She spat out the words with annoyance. Is it wrong for a mother to visit her daughter? Yes, it is. He answered immediately without hesitation. You have the nerve to show your face to the daughter you abandoned. You said she was no longer needed, right? Like trash, right? And now you cling to that trash? How pathetic. Mind your own business. The trash you threw away turned out to be a diamond, huh? How ironic. My mother bit her lip. As my grandpa laughed mockingly, she must have seen him as the villain. But my grandparents were not the wicked people my mother claimed they were. Having lived with them for 10 years, I know them well. Even though my grandpa seemed angry now. He never cursed my parents, even right after I was abandoned. Trying to calm down the obviously sarcastic grandpa, my grandma spoke gently. We've heard the rumors about you. Going around to distant relatives to borrow money. Are you struggling financially? My mother, her face flushed, pursed her lips and muttered softly. Yes, that's right. I have no money. In the next moment, she shouted out loud, as if she had a breakthrough. I have no money. It's all because of Stacy. Hatred flashed across my mother's face. Stacy had been so doted on, what on earth did she do? It was all for nothing, all for nothing. That girl only spends money on clothes and cosmetics, never getting any modeling jobs. That money guzzler. Useless daughter. Seemingly holding back a lot, my mother began to stomp her foot in frustration. As I was taken aback by her disgraceful behavior, a black mass burst out from behind a street tree. For a moment, I thought a wild boar had appeared, causing my heart to nearly stop, but it was Stacy. Hold on, Mom. I can't stand by and let you insult me like this. I'm cute. I'm more beautiful than anyone. A trace of the Stacy from 10 years ago was still there in her breathless indignation. It's true you have no job. All you do is spend money without contributing anything. That's because those around me can't appreciate my charm. And don't lie, Mom. I've done modeling jobs a few times. Stacy's assertion held some truth, despite leading a fulfilling life. I couldn't let go of being abandoned by my family and would check Stacy's social media. Her feed was full of fabulous photos that made me feel worse with each view. Yet I couldn't stop, adding to my misery. But then I noticed something. Stacy's posts had no likes or comments. With only 6 followers, even less than my old, neglected social media account. The occasional comments felt vaguely malicious. Peeking into those accounts revealed clearly derogatory remarks about Stacy without naming her. No experience, yet acting like a pro. Pride higher than anyone else's. Demanding reshoots for hours because a shoot didn't fully capture my charm? No wonder you don't get modeling jobs. Who would want to deal with someone so difficult? What do you know? What's wrong with being particular when I'm a professional? No jobs now, that's the answer. I looked closely at Stacy's face. The overly bright face, the eyes that took up a third of her face, pink lips, a pointed chin. None of these features were present in the real Stacy before me. Stacy's social media persona was built on lies and vanity. I'm different from those other models. I don't resort to surgery or flattery. I'm a real model, aren't I? I don't need to cozy up for jobs like those bottom feeder models. I'd rather not be part of such a ridiculous world. Despite being disowned by her mother, Stacy's confidence was admirable in a way. Anyway, who would have thought the dowdy Jessica would become a CEO of an apparel brand? Maybe you want me as your model? Is that it? I don't favor family, but if you insist, I might consider modeling for your brand. Her super positive nature was likely due to being spoiled by our parents. Now confident, she's the opposite of me, who always looked down. I'm not sure if I envy her. You as our model? Well, it depends on the terms. I might even sign an exclusive contract. I see. But our brand values a natural vibe. We aim to showcase people as they truly are, so it might be difficult for you. What? I've seen your Instagram posts. You and your real self are completely different. Modeling without edits? Are you serious? Stacy's eyes widened too much, and her false eyelashes fell off. The painted skin on her face cracked like porcelain. I'm not going to give you money or use you as a model. You abandoned me, so please, leave me alone. After stating this clearly, I turned my back on them. Stacy muttered in a trembling voice, "Who do you think you are?" I knew in advance they would come to me because Stacy had written about it on her SNS. I will become an exclusive model for some company. Or, when I return to my hometown, everyone keeps glancing at me. Why? Can they tell I'm a model from the city just by my aura? Are complete fantasies. Watching these posts is embarrassing for me, but they have been useful in keeping track of the enemy's movements. Knowing that my parents might visit today or tomorrow, I was prepared and could respond without being shaken. As we were about to leave with my grandparents, my father, who had been as inconspicuous as air, approached us with a grin. Jessica, I haven't done anything terrible to you. I was just a victim, scared of your strong-willed mother and Stacy. I've always been worried about you in my heart. I'm okay, right? His words caught me off guard, causing me to stutter a bit. He then apologized to my grandparents in all seriousness. Dad, Mom, thank you for taking care of Jessica. She is my precious daughter, and you've protected her. But from now on, I will support Jessica. The grandparents were taken aback. Then my mother raised her voice in anger. The likes of you, who might as well have not been there at all, should just keep quiet. She was right. Her words snapped me back to reality. Aren't you also to blame for doing nothing, Dad? What? No, that's ridiculous. It was Stacy and your mother who were directly hostile. Don't lump me together with those mean women. His attempt to ingratiate himself with me was repulsive. I realized I felt no emotion towards this man at all. He was indeed someone whose presence or absence made no difference. Someone unnecessary in my future. Don't start acting like a father now. Jessica doesn't need you in her life. My grandpa spoke exactly what I was feeling. My father, now looking embarrassed, tried his best to blend back into the background with his talent for becoming invisible. However, my persistently hopeful mother weakly reached out to me. Her elderly appearance made her seem pitiful. It's an effective look for stirring sympathy in others. Jessica, I'm really sorry. It was all my fault. You've always lived your life without complaints, being such a good and admirable child. I misunderstood, thinking you didn't need my help because you were so great. Now I realize the truly precious daughter wasn't Stacy, but you. Her tearful eyes wouldn't leave me. Stacy, she might have passed the audition for the modeling agency. But instead of earning money, she ended up paying them for things like entry fees and lesson fees. Could she have been deceived? Your father quit his job to go to New York to support her. And in New York, there were prettier girls everywhere. Stacy being a model was impossible from the start. As I listened silently, my mother kept talking. In contrast, Jessica, you're a CEO. How wonderful. Truly my daughter. The more she praised me, the colder my heart grew. But I was supposed to be the daughter you didn't need, right? Oh, did I say something like that? Feigning ignorance, my mother and I were interrupted by my grandpa. It's quite something for you to have said that, considering you were the one who took Jessica's leg. My mother flinched. Confused the accelerator with the brake, did you? You drove at full speed into Jessica, who was playing in the yard. The yard and the car were a mess. It was a miracle that Jessica's life was saved. That happened decades ago. There's no need to bring it up now. You've blamed me enough for that. Are you still trying to torment me? Finally, I understood why my mother became estranged from my grandparents. Being blamed was the reason, it seems. Even now, she showed no remorse, insisting back then. The brake didn't work. I didn't press the accelerator. It was always about her, not my well-being. Though I have no memory of that time, I can imagine how my mother was. So, this leg, it was all because of you, Mom? No. It wasn't because I hated you that I ran over you. It was an accident. An accident. Oh, the guilt has made me harsh towards you. Jessica. Yes, it's all because of that dreadful accident. My mother broke down crying like a heroine. Logically, I'm the one who should be crying. You couldn't admit your fault. Instead of apologizing for the wrong you did, you just kept making things worse. Me, a failure? No, you're the real failure. Don't ever show your face to me again. My mother's exaggerated crying stopped. Grandpa chuckled softly. The tables have turned. How does it feel, a parent deemed a failure by her own daughter? My mother shook with anger and despair, tears flowing but no sound coming out. Grandpa turned to me with a kind smile. Come on, Jessica. We're going to be late for our lunch reservation. Let's go. Looking forward to the delicious French cuisine. My family consists only of my grandparents. After that, Stacy became somewhat of a celebrity. Likes and comments increased amusingly on her social media. It seems someone recorded our dispute and posted it on social media. Fortunately for me, it was during a moment when Stacy and mother were berating me, leading to a storm of criticism against them. Stacy must be thrilled to have achieved her dream of fame. That fight was a misunderstanding, Jessica. Please explain. Mother and Stacy begged me. No matter how much I tried to argue in the comments, it only fanned the flames. You have to do something, Jessica. There's nothing I can do. I'm just trash that was thrown away, remember? Responding with feigned humility, Stacy and Mother tried everything from prostrating themselves to screaming in frustration. To avoid further involvement, I strengthened the security at my company to ensure we wouldn't cross paths. Initially frustrated, Stacy, ever the super positive, took advantage of the attention. She flooded her identified social media with selfies, hoping to convert the critics into fans. However, as expected, the strategy failed. The comment section was filled with hostile remarks, eventually breaking even Stacy's super positive spirit. After several morose posts, Stacy's updates ceased. I don't know what became of Stacy and Mother. Ah, I almost forgot about Father. Of course, he's just as irrelevant. This encounter with my parents made me appreciate my grandparents even more. Grandpa, Grandma, thank you. Expressing my gratitude felt slightly embarrassing. Grandma took my hand. It's normal for grandparents to love their grandchild. Thanks to my grandparents, I could be a normal girl. Children should always be spoiled by their grandparents. I'm already 25, you know. To us, you will always be our baby Jessica. Age and social status don't matter. In front of my grandparents, I can always be